Shifting consciousness is a mission we all share. This is Skull Babylon, and you're about to listen to the August 18th episode of Paradigm Shift Radio, a new interactive show to assist in the evolution of consciousness. In this episode, we start off with a regular recap of what all this paradigm shifty business is about, and from there I explain that I am doing the show from my hotel room in Ottawa because a film I worked on about Canadian military in Afghanistan called If I Should Fall was playing at a film festival. That segued us into the topic of military and extending our consciousness expanding efforts towards those in uniform. The next topic from the live chat related around chakras, as we talked about the idea of corresponding each of the 7 chakras to the 7 days of the week. Our regular group meditation kept with the theme as we focused on the heart chakra while using a mantra. After that, we briefly discussed the label of Indigo Children and took a question from a caller about sleep paralysis and astral projection with a final practical tip you too can try before the show wrapped up. As always, help raise awareness of the show by sharing this link with your friends and joining the Facebook page. Thank you for listening, and keep on spiraling outwards.
Hello out there in the blog talkosphere. Welcome once again to another episode of Paradigm Shift Radio. I'm one of your hosts tonight, psychic medium, modern mystic, Michael Brazel. We're waiting for Skull Babylon to come online. He is having some technical difficulties, as is expected with the wonderful platform that we have, Blog Talk Radio. He is in the chat room, though, so we'll get things running here in a few minutes. So just so you know how the show runs, those of you out there who want to ask questions and things, be sure you are putting them into the private messages. We appreciate all of you taking this time to share this show with all of those folks who are on your Facebook pages, your Twitter pages, and everything in between. So be sure you're getting this show out there so we can have these conversations, these moments where we come together for consciousness expansion, and this is what the show is about. We're here tonight to, let you be the guests. So tonight, the number to call in is 347-326-9263. Skull is updating his Skype. We've had those issues here with the show before also. If you're having trouble dialing into the show, be sure you refresh your browsers. Some certain browsers work well with Blog Talk, others don't. Skype, this happened to me the other night. This is another one of those weeks for technology. So, if you're having technical issues, be sure you're refreshing, do what you can, and keep sharing the show information while we're in these moments of waiting for things to coalesce. So lots of stuff going on out there. This week on the show, we've had, just a really great run. This entire channel has just been doing really well. All the shows on the channel have been doing phenomenal, and we appreciate everyone who's tuned in, not just to Paradigm Shift Radio, but to the other shows on this channel. Every Monday night, myself and David Salisbury bring you The Psychic and the Witch. Tuesday nights is myself and Ms. Ronnie. We do a show called Keeping It Real. We offer readings and sessions on that show. This show is more of a topical discussion on just about everything that it spans that spiritual gamut. We talk about everything from meditation to occult sciences to new science, new thought, and we want you all to be part of this process. So be sure if you have questions or topics that you want myself or Skull to talk about, put them in a private message for either one of us so that we can actually bring those conversations on air. Also, don't be afraid to call in the show, 347-326-9263, 347-326-9263, the number to call in. A couple quick shout-outs out there. Hello, DMT Theory, Gabriel Oswald, our new countdown person for the show, Sky Graves, The Universe Happening, Chain Links, who's always out there supporting the show, not just this show, but I see he's out there on every single one of the shows that we do. So we appreciate all of you for making this show happen. And just a quick update on the numbers. We typically now get anywhere from 100 to 200 plus live listeners a show, and our downloads are exceeding. One of our shows was downloaded over 700 times. So it's great to see you all not only engaging in the live conversation, but also going back and engaging in the downloads and sharing the show that way. So be sure, even if you're not tuning in live, you might miss a show. It's okay. Go back and download the show, share it with your friends, and if your friends haven't heard about the show and aren't able to tune in live, share the archive so they can go back and become part of that experience. You can also find Paradigm Shift all over the Facebook. So find us, Paradigm Shift DC, Paradigm Shift London, Paradigm Shift Radio. All those spots are in the Facebook groups, so be sure you're joining the conversations on those group pages. And now it looks like I have Skull online. Just 1 second here. Hello, Skull, are you there?
Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, we did.
Dun, dun, dun. All right.
Yeah. That was like, I go to call in, normally I do, and it's suddenly just like, oh, you need to update Skype this time. So I'm like, sure, why not? We're only a couple minutes into the show, so let's make up some lost time here. But no, thanks for holding it down for me. So
that's how we roll.
Yeah. So as Michael's already said, thank you guys for tuning in again. And I know we're always going to have new listeners when we're listening to this show. So just to sort of give you guys a bit of a recap, Michael, he's been doing his show. He's got multiple shows happening throughout the week through his Blog Talk Radio channel. And myself, Skull Babylon, I'm only here on Saturdays. Throughout the week, I'm doing other stuff and everything. But for those unfamiliar, what we're sort of doing here with the whole Paradigm Shift Radio thing, Paradigm Shift Radio is just really a branch of something bigger, but we sort of encapsulate into this whole objective, this mission of shifting consciousness, of expanding consciousness, of learning more, of practicing, being able to talk about the things that we don't usually get a chance to practice, talking about in normal public spheres, to encourage you to take the conversations that we have here as examples and then bring those conversations or even practical things that you're learning about and take them and apply them and bring them into your community or your real life. So I myself, Skull Babylon, I am an associate with a group called Paradigm Shift London. And Michael, he's associated with Paradigm Shift DC. And Paradigm Shift is basically a collective of these communities that are not only Facebook pages, but are also physical communities that are working towards meeting up on a regular basis to, like I said, to encourage this sort of conversation to happen. So for those who may be new to this whole concept, the websites that you're going to want to check out are the standard facebook.com/Paradigm Shift London, and then there's also Paradigm Shift Central. And if you go to Paradigm Shift Central, from there you'll see the links to the other Paradigm Shift communities that we currently have up and running throughout the globe right now, and that is a growing number throughout the weekend. That's something where you guys can go there and you can check, and I got some info written up on some tips on how you can get a Paradigm Shift community started in your own area, and you don't even have to call it a Paradigm Shift community. Like some of you probably already are doing something similar, and it might just be a small group of friends of yours. So we encourage you to just keep doing what you're doing, but if you want to use the name Paradigm Shift, the whole idea is that brings together this sense of solidarity, if you want to call it that, that community aspect that's going to help add momentum, and it's going to help more people sort of hop on board and just really get things rolling, because time is of the essence right now. And in Paradigm Shift news, one of the most recent Paradigm Shift communities to emerge that I'm aware of is actually in the Netherlands. So that's a very cool thing. That's the first Paradigm Shift page that I cannot read because I don't speak Dutch, I guess. Is that correct? That's a language.
Something like that.
Yeah. But that's so cool, though. I love seeing that, and congratulations to them, because I'm sure there's people within that community who are actually listening. So that's awesome, and that's what we want. That's what we want Paradigm Shift communities to sort of be existing throughout the globe, and for them to be able to network through Facebook.com/Paradigm Shift Central, and then to have that as a hub. And then over the years, that's definitely going to be something where that's the soil from which new fruit shall grow from. So that's basically the rundown on what you're listening to in terms of Paradigm Shift and Paradigm Shift communities and this whole consciousness shifting thing. But Michael already said that this show is about you guys, so we want you guys to call in. And Michael's already talked to you about the number that you can do to do that, and all you really need is Skype, but you can also use a regular phone as well. So I'm sure we'll do that within the next couple minutes, but other than that, let's just do a quick rundown on what's new. Michael, anything you want to bring up?
Geez, what's new? Everything constantly seems to be shifting and changing. Lots of new stuff happening here on the channel. We have some great guests coming up next week on a couple of the other shows. Here in the DC area, we're kicking off a lot of our group stuff. People are finally coming back in from vacation. So if you're in the DC area, Facebook me, and I'll add you to some of the groups stuff that we're doing here. We have a local meetup group that I run, the Soul Interaction Meetup Group. I'll post links to all these things in the chat room. We host a lot of spiritual discussions. We also have the Paradigm Shift DC meetup group that I'm linking into all the other meetup groups that I do. We just had an art carding event. Art carding is really fun. You get together and you use these little 2 by 3 inch cards, and you use them for meditations, and you actually create the images on the card. And I guess art carding has become this really big thing. I've heard about it, and then one of my members of one of my groups, she decided to start leading this whole art card movement within our spiritual groups. And it's a really great way to create these little mini art pieces. And even if you're not artistic, you can do sacred geometry, you can do sigils, you can do all kinds of things with it, and you can even trade them back and forth. So it's spiritual baseball cards or something.
Wow.
So it's fun. Getting into the artistic space and that creative space can be a great way to connect within the community. And we're going to be doing a lot of other events in September here. So I'll be posting all the links to the groups here. I also had an email from someone in North Carolina who said that they may be starting a Paradigm Shift group in North Carolina. So I'm waiting to hear back from them. So, the groups are popping up everywhere. And as always, if you all need help, even, not just for setting up Paradigm Shift stuff, but even just to talk through some spiritual concepts and things, I have folks who always email me, who Facebook me, who Skype me. I have no problem answering questions. And, of course, if you need help starting something up directly, don't be afraid to reach out to either Skull or myself so we can help you facilitate that.
Yeah, that's the big thing with the Paradigm Shift communities. I've known this through my first-hand experience through the Paradigm Shift London stuff, because that goes back to when we started in the college that I was at a few years ago. But it is it's a support group in a lot of ways. You can call it that, and that's no lie at all, because there's a lot of people who are coming into these energies, and a lot of them may be coming from stressful situations. Maybe they've spent the last 10 years of their life being told that they're crazy, and then suddenly they find a group of people and they're like, no, it's okay, we know what you're talking about. So in that sense, the role that you can play within your community is one where you're actually genuinely helping people simply by being there to listen to them. And again, that's something that I encourage you guys to do. Just and it doesn't even have to be through the affiliation of a Paradigm Shift thing. Just do it with the people in your life, and start sparking those conversations, and just sort of spread that love sort of thing, and not as a cliche by any means, but that's something that you literally have to start bringing into your life as a daily practice. Don't even ostracize anyone. It is really the kind of way you need to approach it. Everyone in their essence is a soul, is is that divine spark. So there's a part of them, whether they may not really be fully portraying it on the surface, that is interested in aspects of the fact that this reality is not as cut and dry. So someone who may be totally just a sheep, quote unquote, I guarantee you, and I challenge you to try and get them to open up about a topic that would be maybe something paradigm shifty. So it could be something about dreams, it could be something about UFOs, it could be something about crop circles, chakras, or anything like that. Odds are they've probably heard of something along those lines, and then start encouraging that conversation. And then that's it's like watering that plant, and it's just something that's going to grow over time. And not only is it helping them, but it's helping you as well, because you're getting that first-hand experience of being able to practice communicating your ideas and getting that visceral feedback of what it's like to be able to make a difference in the people's lives around you. So
yeah, breathe.
Man,
I think that's the new thing this year, is I'm noticing a lot of people just not breathing. It's the one thing. I had this person come in my shop. For those of you who don't know, I manage a metaphysical store here, and people come in all the time. They're like, "Man, what can I do? I need to things are moving in my house, and this is happening, and my life is in chaos, and what can I buy to fix this? And I'm like, don't buy anything, just breathe. And they look at me like I'm crazy, like it's the first time anyone's ever told them to like breathe. But it really is true if you think about it. I think the one thing we all forget to do is just breathe. And I just noticed myself. I just noticed a second ago I was typing something to a friend who was just emailing me this weird, nothing's coincidental. He was like, man, there's movement happening, and what's going on with this? I'm like, great, I'm doing a radio show right now in regards to, I noticed I was holding my breath. I was typing this thing, and I was like, man, breathe, So I was saying that more for myself because I noticed that sometimes we hold our breath when things are happening and shifting and changing around us. So be sure that, if you're noting yourself holding your breath through the day, I actually have it programmed on my phone now as an alarm. It just goes off and it says breathe. So I just take a moment to remind myself because I'm hyper type A, so I'm always doing 1,000 things at one time, and breathing sometimes gets forgotten. So
yeah, and I mean, even the whole idea of breathing, like, there's a part of ourselves that knows how to get through whatever situation it is that we're in. And it's oftentimes that we embody the elements of like anger or frustration or something like that we find ourselves just being more frustrated with the situation that we're in. So the whole idea of breathing is to bring ourselves into that centered spot where we're not necessarily like giving up control, but we're more accepting the fact that we have control and we know what to do in that given situation if we can just sort of like tap into like that divine aspect of ourselves. And you can sort of think about it as like your higher self or whatever. But I mean, there's lessons around every corner in our life, but if you genuinely are breathing and you genuinely are conscious, there's no mistakes. There's only lessons, and you will be able to get through them, and everything is a learning experience, like every single day. So that's like the whole paradigm shifty thing, is that like every single day is like this whole learning experience. Like the universe is trying to teach you lessons. Are you paying attention is the question. Are you breathing? Are you doing your job as a student to like take those notes and like genuinely try and like learn those lessons? Because if you don't learn those lessons right away, they're just going to keep coming right back to you until you do.
It's very true, and I think a lot of times too, I was researching for a blog post I was writing on intentional breathing, and one part of the thing that I wanted to open the blog with was 106 people every minute stop breathing. So it's 106 lives that are lost every minute when breathing ceases for those people. And I think sometimes we take breathing for granted. We look to the outside to fix things, and we, are trying to find some greater solution. Which candles can I burn? Which entity can I channel? Which book can I read? And sometimes breathing is the thing we forget. But if you look at all the spiritual practices, everything comes through that place of the breath. Everything starts with that deep inhale and that deep exhale, and you get clarity. And when you give yourself space, and that's what breathing is, it's space, it's movement, it's so much stuff tied into breathing. So be sure that you're breathing. If you're not breathing, breathe.
And I mean, even in terms of, everything small is just a small version of something big, to quote Adventure Time, which is a cartoon full of esoteric knowledge, and I'm sure some of you know that, who have seen it and know what I'm talking about. But those who don't, just as a quick, like in brackets here, like watch the show Adventure Time with Finn and Jake. It's an awesome show. I'm just recommending it. But what I'm saying is the idea that everything small is just a small version of something big. The breath that we're talking about right now, like the breath within our lungs, the breath within ourselves, is a reflection of the cosmic breath, is a reflection of like what the universe is doing on like a grand scale, as well as like what's happening throughout all these, like between the micro and the macro, in terms of like the cycles within nature, the seasons of the year, like the everything sort of like comes in and then falls out, even in terms of like awareness. And that's sort of what is happening with like this whole shift thing, is that like we've done that, we've sort of like fallen out of awareness, and now we're coming back into it in the same sense of like that's the breath, like that is the cosmic breath that is existing in every moment. Like that's the pulse of the universe. So I mean, when you're breathing, you're not literally just filling your lungs with air, you're like embodying that essence of the universe as propelling everything forward.
And I think when I look at breath, it's the one unifying. If we look at the breath as a religion, it is the one shared thing that we all have, so it transcends even that space. But everything breathes, and we're breathing the same air that a murderer breathes the same air that a Christian breathes the same air that, you know, a light worker breathes the same air that a dog breathes. So we're all sharing that same breath. But, you know, if you look at it in the essence of spirituality, without it, we cease to exist. We transition from this space. We don't have to see it to believe it. When we take that deep breath in, it's something that's a tangible form of connection to something that's external from us, that we don't have to see to know that, you know, when I do that deep inhale, something's going to happen. You know, but it's the one thing we take for granted, and one thing we, you know, forget about when things go awry. Much like our spirituality sometimes, you know, we forget that we have those meditation practices. Now, that's something I noticed here. We have a very vibrant pagan community here, but there were some fractures that happened within the community. And the one thing I noticed was this giant group of spiritual people got so involved with the politics, they forgot about their spirituality. The spirituality was the first thing to go out the window. And I was just, you know, it was a moment for me to kind of take a step back and bear witness to how sometimes in these moments of upheaval, spiritual people quickly lose all sense of spirituality. I don't know if you've ever been in a witch war, but it's pretty brutal.
I think I saw an anime about that once.
I know, we're throwing spells back and forth for like ducking brooms and stuff. I don't know, it gets pretty nutty.
Yeah, psychic battles, like a South Park.
Yeah, those are great. I love having those. I'm a champion those, so you know. So what's going on in the world of Skull Babylon these days?
Well, I'll give you the obvious stuff. Right now I'm actually in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, the capital of Canada. And just to since you asked, just to sort of do like a selfless plug for the reason why I'm here. The reason why I'm in Ottawa is because a film that I directed and edited had just shown in a film festival today. So I literally just got back from the film festival, and the film that was shown is called If I Should Fall. So there's a website for that, and anybody listening, feel free to type in the website, and there's a trailer on the website, and I'll explain it as you're sort of looking at the website. And if someone wants to type that in the live chat right now, I'll do that as well. But the film itself, the best way I can explain it is that it's a documentary, and the documentary is actually about a soldier, a Canadian soldier. He was killed in Afghanistan in 2009 by an IED. So, I mean, at first glance, you know, like you sort of look at this whole paradigm shift stuff that I do, and then you look at this documentary, which is a documentary about military, and maybe to the untrained eye, it might be two different things. But I mean, in terms of in how I see it, in the bigger picture of trying to get people to go through this process of like healing and opening up to new conversation and talking and connecting with themselves, like this is not something separate. So that's why I'm talking about it now, because this is a relevant topic. So the film itself, If I Should Fall, ifishouldfall.com, is it's a very spiritual film in its own way, and as a documentary, it's presented through a series of interviews with the family of the soldier. The trooper was Trooper Mark Diab from Mississauga, and he was with a reconnaissance unit called the Royal Canadian Dragoons. And so it's through interviews with his family and through the eyes of his comrades, and as well as some other people involved who have insight on the Afghan war. And the film itself is very intentionally not pro-war or anti-war, but rather the story that it focuses on is the human element of what happens when a soldier is killed in combat, and not even just a soldier, but I mean even just the whole process of death, like the whole process of grief, and how we as humans sort of experience this. So the film is a very, very visceral experience, and the DVD is available. I'm just letting you guys know because anybody can order it online. But the big reason why this film has been successful is because it's structured in such a way that for the people who are watching it, they're viscerally going through the experience of what the family went through. Like there's a moment in the film where the family like talks about how they received that knock on the door, and you know, and they find out that news. So you hear them sort of talking about this, and the big way I want to approach it is that I didn't want it to be in the sense of pity, but rather in the sense of empathy, because pity is often based out of sympathy, whereas empathy is based out of compassion. So there's a lot to this film in multi-layers, and it is a very spiritual film in its own way. part of the main reason behind that is Mark Diab himself. He is also very spiritual, and the reason the film is called If I Should Fall is because part of the story is that before he died, he actually had a premonition of his own death, and he actually made a video to be shown at his funeral, and the video was called Don't Cry, I'll See You Tomorrow. So, I mean, he had this understanding that, like, even through death, even after death, he understood innately that he would still be able to, like, be with the people in his life, and the message was not, like, the big part of the story is his girlfriend, Mary, who's within the film, and that's, like, a huge part of the story. So it's really just about, like, these underlying themes that are not pushed on the audience, but they can see them if they're looking for them, and it is about this idea of, you know, the strength of the human spirit, the importance of remembrance, and this idea that, like, beyond death, those who we love are not truly gone, and you can think of it even in the simple ways of, like, oh, you know, they exist through our memories, but you can literally look at it, and this is kind of, you know, from my own perspective and my own experiences working on the film, there actually is more of a truth to that, in this idea that, like, as spirit, as soul, when we die, like, we're not literally just, like, ceasing to exist, we're just sort of, like, moving on to that next phase of existence, and it's not even the next phase, it's more of, like, where we originally came from, like, you know, before we were born into this life, we sort of exist within those dimensional spaces, like, call it the astral planes, of what you want, and as there you exist as soul, and then you're born into this body, and then you sort of, you know, you go through that process of living, but then after that you're, like, back in the astral again, and when you're in the astral, you can actually, like, still interact with the people on the physical planes in a lot of ways, and just like a quick tidbit as to some of the experiences I had, like, working on this film. For me, like, working on this film, I mean, considering the obvious topic is about me working on a film about a soldier who I didn't even know in real life, like, the whole circumstances that led up to this film happening, and again, the website is ifitfall.com, the whole thing that led up to this film happening was, so much of it was, like, circumstance, and it was really just, like, it landed in my lap, and a big part of it was, for me, I see it as a part of my dharma, you know, as part of my, like, contract coming into this life, which is a really interesting thing, because then you sort of think, like, okay, so was this part of Mark's contract as well? And that got me thinking about, like, this idea that, like, the way how things unfolded with this film, like, did me and Mark have some sort of conversation within the astral, and we sort of said, like, you know, like, look, this is how we're going to do it, and we're going to tell this story, like, I'm going to live my life, and then like I said, he had this huge premonition that he wasn't coming home. And in terms of Canadian casualties, there's not there's 158 who have been killed, and that's, you know, compared to the Americans, like per capita, that's still a lot for Canada. But I mean, just the fact that, like, there's a huge theme of like me working on the project and almost feeling as if, like, Mark was working on it with me, and I was going through this whole spiritual process, you know, my own, like, just awareness and everything. So I mean, I was open up to that idea, and that's a really interesting thing working on the film, because, and people have actually commented on this within the film. They said that it feels like Mark is, like, a part of the film, like, it feels like he worked on the film, and there's also, like, his own video camera footage in it and stuff. So I mean, it's a really, really powerful film, and this is you know, testament for that would be the fact that it's, like, been it's received over like 6 or 7 awards, and I always say, you know, like, the awards, it's good that it's being recognized, but I mean, like, it's not something that I sort of, like, take those awards and put on my shelf and claim to my own, but rather it's good that the film itself is being recognized, and even just a story about our military and our soldiers and everything, without it being like this political spin or anything, because it really is about the human story and just, like, understanding, like, what happens with the family and stuff. So like, it's an interesting topic, and it's not something it's not something that usually, you know, some people are kind of afraid to talk about it, or they'll even completely avoid it altogether. You know, they'll just put on this label that, like, war is bad and everything, and you know, like, that's, war sucks. Like, I agree. But I mean, on my take, you know, support the troops is kind of the way to approach it, because what this film sort of reflects upon is the fact that, like, beyond the uniform, like, these are still humans. Like, these soldiers, you know, they're not just, like, they're not just cogs in the machine. As much as you can claim that they're victims of circumstances, they're still very much human in the same sense that you're human and the people listening to the show are human. So therefore, they deserve our attention and they deserve our respect as much as anybody else. And there's so much that we can learn from them, and there's so much that we can do to help them in terms of like this collective healing process, and a big part of that begins simply by listening to their story as opposed to like choosing to ignore it. So it's just something that, again, the website is ifishouldfall.com, and for anybody listening to this like either live or in the future, feel free to go to the website. The DVD is available. Check out the trailer. It's something that I'm happy to share with you and everyone else, and I hope more people get to see it. The film's actually been shown in the Parliament in Canada, so I mean it is being recognized, and we're trying to get it into like high schools and stuff. So it's a really cool thing. And now I know, Michael, like you actually have your own connection to the military. So I mean, what have you watched? You've seen the trailer for the film,
right? Yeah, I've seen the trailer. Yeah.
I'm curious. What are your thoughts?
It was really good. I saw it because I saw it first through. I guess you did a little mini documentary on YouTube where you had gone to visit Joe, and then I saw that movie referenced there, and I went and looked it up, and I really, one, as a military member, appreciated it. I think, we do forget that the people wearing the uniforms are people. We get so caught up in the politics of the machine itself, the military machine, and having served myself for 10 years in the U.S. Navy, we even sometimes when we're in those spaces, we forget that we're part of a machine, but there's so much that happens beneath those layers, the friendships that you build, the people that you connect with. It's like a family, and you create these family units and these family bonds. I still carry those experiences. I would never, and I wouldn't go back, but I wouldn't trade any of those experiences and the things that I learned. And before I left the military, part of my job was to train these next generation sailors coming into the Navy to be part of this greater experience. And one of the things I really got from that was getting to hear what all these new recruits, why their reasons for joining were. And it's always just amazing to see the reasons why people connect into that space. And a lot of people assume that sometimes we join solely for the purpose of getting money for school and things. But there is such a power in being part of something that's so large with so much potential in those spaces. And when you come in as a new recruit, you're really connecting into something that's so much greater. And there's such a sense of purpose in that space. And I remember when I came in, there was just such a powerful connection to this entity that was so much bigger than I was, and then getting to be part of that experience. And I've actually gone in the war zones and things, and it's powerful, the things that happen in those spaces. And I think it's hard for sometimes folks who are on the other side to see and to actually understand what goes on in the military. And I think just from watching the trailer, you really captured a part of the experience that a lot of people don't get to see, because when you do strip it down and you do take away the uniform, we're all the same. We're all going through the same struggles. And even now when I do readings, and here in D.C. especially, I have folks that, clients of mine that work at the Pentagon, clients of mine that work in, military installations, and these are Reiki masters. These are healers, these are psychics, these are very powerful intuitives that are working in these spaces and taking their gifts, not so overtly into these spaces, but taking their healing and that energy into these spaces where it's still needed. That healing and that energy is still needed in those spaces too, so we can't forget that these are individuals who are, by circumstance, having to engage in something that's greater than them, even if they don't necessarily aren't fully engaged in the process of wanting to be in war. It's your job, when you're in the military, and I think that's a lot hard for some people to grasp. That because I'm myself, I'm not one for war. But it's an unfortunate, necessary part of this energy that we're in, and there are certain people whose jobs it is to engage in that aspect, and they still need healing. And I think I really found appreciation in that, because I think you did give a voice to that aspect of it. So.
Yeah, just to sort of add on to that, there's there is a lot of work being done for soldiers, and I hope it's continued, and I hope we see more of it, where they are getting the, just people to be able to talk to, or even getting programs where they're working with things like meditation to help them deal with like post-traumatic stress injury and things such as that. And I'm happy to help create a film, because I've had soldiers, the ones directly involved in the film and the ones who have seen the film afterwards, like come up to us and thank us for just saying, what you sort of did on screen helped me heal in my own way, knowing that like people within culture have a better understanding of what I've been through. And there's so much within the film that makes it really unique. And one of the main things of that is the fact that like different people are going to see it from their own perspectives, whether it be through the eyes of the girlfriend, the mother, the father, or even like the friend or anything like that. So it's a really visceral, like emotional roller coaster ride. And I agree. Like it's an unfortunate circumstance, and I don't think it would be fair for I don't think it's fair in general for people to just like say that like war is bad and like cops and military are the enemy and stuff. Like I see that all the time with call them anarchists or what you want to do, whatever you want to call them. But I see that where they sort of they go and they like they'll start a protest and stuff like that, and they show up basically just to like yell at the cops, and it's just, to me, I'm just like, where is the progress happening? Like what is that actually accomplishing? So if they could sit down and be like cops, like, we're just going to sit here and just like have a nice conversation and you're welcome to join us or something like that. Like, I don't know how realistic that is, but I mean,
you'd be surprised. When I used to work for PETA, that's what we would do. I coming from my military background, we'd have the activists who would go out there and they'd be intentionally go out there to antagonize the police, because they feel it's just us versus them. And I remember just coming in from my Navy background, I would go up, I would approach them, and I would thank them for being there, even though they may not, they've been more standoffish at first. But when I would walk up to them and say thank you for what you're doing, that was usually the first time they've heard that in those protest situations, because they're there to protect the protesters just as much as they are to protect whatever it is you're protesting. So sometimes just saying thank you to a service. We sometimes forget that those people are providing a service, and sometimes we forget it unless we need them, and then of course we remember that we need the police or the military or otherwise. So thank a service member, or thank someone out there who's wearing a uniform.
Yeah, and I know, I'm sure there are people who are listening to the show right now who have been involved in service in some way or another, and it's great. It's great that those people have like found their way to information such as what we got going on here, because like that's great. Like I guarantee you that there's people like within the military who are totally interested in things like the the non-mainstream sort of stuff, whether how deep it goes. Like I'm not, it depends on the person. But totally, you don't want to just assume that because someone's in a military uniform that they're like not interested in things like dreaming or astral projection or anything like that, right? Like that's just totally naive and just inappropriate. So I mean, in the same way, in the terms of the whole paradigm shift thing, that would be the goal, right? Is to reach out to as many people as we can, and that includes the military, because there's no enemies here. Like if you're labeling people as enemies, then like you've kind of already lost, in my opinion. So like a big part of this whole thing in my mind is this process of forgiveness. Like even to be able to like forgive your enemies, if you want to, like, not, again, like don't even call them enemies, but to understand that like things are unfolding and different parties are playing different roles and things like that. But to try and blame them for doing that, I just don't think that really moves things forward as much. Like it just doesn't move things along as smoothly as it could. It keeps halting the process.
And I think too, the other part that feeds that is, and unfortunately sometimes we see things like on InfoWars, we're talking about police states and we're talking about the military coming in and imposing martial law. We have to understand that, even in those spaces, and coming from the military, I haven't necessarily seen a lot of that. There is evidence of some of that stuff that does happen, of course. But even in those spaces, there's always two sides to every story. And having been in the military, sometimes when they're called into action for certain things, it may have a different, perception is everything, but sometimes when things are happening outside of that realm, and there's things that I've seen when I was in, that I can't talk about, but when things are happening, sometimes it is for the greater protection, and you have to just be aware that when people are in those spaces and they're being called into action, there's still people in those spaces. And we have to, take a step back and be sure that, we're not adding to chaotic nature of me going on, and actually taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture rather than just, feeding into whatever illusion is being presented to right away. Of course, there's multiple layers of things that happen around us. But just like with everything, even stuff you'll hear on this show, always use your discernment. Always go for the bigger picture. Always ask questions that take you deeper. Just because someone like Jones says this is happening, X, Y, Z is the truth, doesn't necessarily mean that's the only truth. It's one layer of a reality. Because you'll hear him say something, you'll hear David Icke say something, you'll hear David Cox say something, you'll hear someone else say something, and don't take it given to you on your plate as the absolute. Ask your own questions, dig a little deeper for yourself. So, but I think we're on that.
Ask questions rather than accept answers.
But exactly, because everyone's reality is going to be their reality based on their viewpoint, their vantage point. So be sure you're asking your questions. Be sure you're doing what you can. And this is the purpose of shows like this and groups that you can start locally. Have those discussions. If you see something big that's happening on a show like, InfoWars or a discussion that we'll talk about here, take those questions to your groups or to your, in your little circles, or even go on those forums on those sites and question things and really engage in conversation rather than saying, oh, yeah, sure, this must be the absolute. Because coming from the military, I see those things and I cringe sometimes, because I think sometimes when we see a lot of those stories without any balance, it really creates a negative unbalanced state of how we will engage those military members who are doing a greater service. So breathe.
Important stuff, I'm glad we do have a chance to talk about it here. So, but that said, guys, we want to hear what you want to talk about now that you've heard us just sort of give that little spiel there. So, for anybody who's listening, Mike, should we be welcoming some calls within the next minute or so? I know.
We have. Okay, so this is how this all works, folks, just so you all know, because I see some calls, and sometimes you call in just to listen, and that's perfectly fine. If you want to get on the show, you have to press 1, so I know that you're in the queue, so that way I won't queue up your call and you're like, oh, I don't know, I was just listening. So you have to press 1 on your keypad so that I know. So it actually sends a little flag up so that I know that you want to come on the show. Don't be afraid to actually come on the show and speak with us. And if you want to continue the discussion we're having or to bring on something new, I see a lot of really great stuff happening in the chat, everything from reverse aging to heart chakra stuff. Remember, if you want a discussion to happen on the show, you have to send it in a private chat, because there's a private message to myself or to Skull, because there's so much that's scrolling through that we can't just, it's hard for us to go back and grab specific topics out. The number to call in tonight is 347-326-9263. 347-326-9263. So call in, get yourself on the show, ask a question. If you are calling in, just be concise with what it is that you want to speak about. So if there's a topic, something that's burning a hole through your entire chakric system and you feel like it's time to finally have this discussion. And we've discussed just about everything on this show so far. So we do have one person.
Not yet.
Yeah, we're getting
so
there.
Much
We've
more.
already covered,
we got a few more encyclopedias to go through, so
we've already gone through some pretty obtuse things. So nothing's off limits. Bring it to the show. I mean, seriously, we've talked about everything from fear to military to, everything in between those things. So bring your topics, and if you are uneasy about coming on the show, be sure that you send this to us in an email. You can send it to me at michael@michaelbrazel.com, or you can Facebook either one of us. So I'll do one quick question here from the chat that just popped up. So the question is from DMT Theory, and it just says opening the heart chakra. So DMT theory, if you can expand on that, what's your question in reference to opening the heart chakra? Is processes, or is there something you want us to discuss? What do you feel? What's a method that you've used, Skull, for opening the heart chakra, or what do you feel is the importance of having an open heart chakra?
Well, I guess the importance of it is to sort of be able to bridge that not just empathy, but think of it in the terms of telepathy. So in the same sense that we use the word telepathy, which is the sort of a sci-fi notion of reading each other's thoughts, if you have an open heart chakra, it's opening you up to this idea that we're giving off vibrations all the time, right? So if there's someone who's around you and you have an open heart chakra, you're actually going to be able to viscerally sort of be able to connect with what it is that they may be experiencing, and then if you do that, you'll be able to more appropriately deal with the situation at hand, because you'll have a better understanding of how that person is perceiving that experience. So telepathy is just an interesting word that I would sort of coin with the idea of opening up the heart chakra.
And, I think too, the other side of heart chakra work is we get so focused on heart chakra and we forget about the other 6 chakras. Mm-hmm. So remember,
I have a good segue if we want to talk about chakras. There's something I actually did want to bring up.
Yeah, so I'll just finish off on this, and we'll talk about chakras, and maybe they'll take us right into our meditation.
Yeah, that's a good topic.
Because, folks, we do want you to call in. I only see a couple people in the queues. We want you to be part of this experience. I see a lot of conversations happening in the chat. Bring those conversations over and into the show. So heart chakra is really important to open, and typically in a lot of people, heart chakra represents our change chakra. The other chakra that really we need to be sure we're working with also is the solar plexus chakra. That's our fear chakra. And sometimes you'll hear it, on conversations and topics on this show, is you'll hear people talking about these fear spaces or engaging fear, and that really comes in from that solar plexus chakra. But you really want to be sure you're balancing all chakras. Sometimes we get so caught up on specific, we get caught up on the root chakra, we get so caught up on the crown chakra, and then we sometimes forget about the other chakras, and we want to be sure that we're balancing out everything in those spaces. Having unbalanced energy systems can throw you into different emotional states or even different physical states. So just be sure that when you are working with the energies, and those of you out there too who are really engaging in some of the Kundalini work, and I get messages all the time from some of you out there who are really engaged in this opening process. You want to open everything up. Do it in a way that is, be careful, because that energy systems, when they open up, especially when you're working with Kundalini, things like breath of fire, things like changing your nutritional systems to open up all the energy systems. It's just like you're opening up all those filters at the same time. You want to be sure you're not going to burn out your systems while you're doing that. You can actually, I had a friend of mine who, was doing breath of fire, which is a Kundalini yoga technique. If your chakras are blocked, it can actually cause, vertebra to rupture, because the energy is moving up, and if it's blocked at a chakra, because you're trying to force energy through the hose, which is that center channel, it can actually cause physical damage in the body, and that's called Kundalini psychosis, and that's an actual, medical thing. So just be careful about how you're engaging, but engage fully and engage through a balanced place, not just focusing on one over the others.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I'll just sort of segue to what I was going to talk about in regards to chakras. One thing to help create a more mindful sense of what chakras are and everything like that. This is something that I was talking about with a good buddy of mine, Derek, within Paradigm Shift London, and it's actually this idea that, again, sort of going back to the micro macro sort of thing. We have 7 days of the week, and we also have 7 main chakras. Is that a coincidence? Not necessarily. So here's the idea. Each day of the week is actually associated with different chakras within our own system. So starting with Monday would be root chakra, and then Tuesday would be sacral, and then Wednesday would be solar plexus, and then Thursday heart, and then Friday would be the throat, and then Saturday would be the third eye, and then Sunday would be the crown chakra. So when you think about it this way, so root chakra is kind of about grounding and stuff like that, about balancing sort of that sense of stability. So where are we in sense of Monday. Usually in Mondays, we're sort of getting ready for the week ahead, right? Okay, so then you sort of move ahead, and then you get into this idea that you can sort of use each day of the week to sort of focus on a specific chakra within your own system, and to sort of bring that into the awareness of like what you're doing throughout the day. So with like Tuesday would be sacral. So Michael, feel free to add in terms, because I know you got a bit more insight on like what each chakra is sort of associated with energy-wise. So Tuesday would be the sacral. So that obviously it relates to like sexuality and everything like that, and that would be like a good day for like, you know, you could look at like meditate on any day, but like that would be like a particularly good day to meditate and maybe like do some sort of like internal alchemy in terms of like transmutating you know, like seminal fluids or anything like that if you're like at that state. And then you sort of work your way through. So I mean, just to sort of jump a couple, by the time you get to Friday would be the throat chakra. So I mean, think about it. Where are you on Fridays? Like Friday, you're usually like, you know, if you're thinking in terms of culture or whatever, you're usually like out with your buddies and stuff, and you're having a good time, and you might be like downtown or something. So you're doing a lot of talking. You're like you're literally practicing like using your throat chakra. So I mean, it's interesting for the Paradigm Shift London group. We always have our regular meetings on Fridays. So that corresponds with the idea of using the throat chakra. We sit in a circle and we have conversation. And then so Saturday, I always refer to Saturdays as psychic Saturdays, and that's not just like a pun. Like that's literally this idea that like Saturday is associated with the sixth chakra, which would be like the third eye chakra. So I mean, you know, like that's like that intuitive aspect within our knowing, that sort of, you know, this idea of like connecting to the higher self sort of thing, and that like you know, the internal aspect of ourselves that like knows things, sort of like that sight beyond sight sort of aspect. Like that is the third eye element within ourselves. So then from there, you would have the seventh day of the week, which would be Sunday, and the Sunday is the crown chakra. So it's this idea of like reconnecting with your higher self, and that's something that's quite common within a lot of like religious practices. You know, the day Sunday is the Sabbath. That's that day where you sort of reconnect with God, like quote unquote. So feel free to add to that, Michael. But I mean, have you ever thought about that, like the idea of the weeks actually corresponding to the seven chakras?
I haven't. That's an interesting way of looking at it. I do like that, because sometimes for a lot of people the hardest part about engaging any type of spirituality or any type of practice is structure. So you know, pick one a day. You know, and another way you can do that too is if you want to leave it more up to the universe. One thing that I like to do is I have a little bag that has a different color stone representing each chakra, and I'll just reach in the bag and pull out a stone, and that's the stone that represents the chakra that I need to work on that day. So there's lots of ways to create some structure in those spaces, because I do see, you know, without that structure in itself creates a very balanced approach to engaging your entire chakric energy system. And those are just the 7 main energy systems. There's chakras that run throughout our entire bodies. In the Hindu tradition, there's 72,000 nadis, or energy systems and centers, that run throughout the entire body. So there's multiple layers to that, and everything from, you know, when you talk about Reiki, there's the healing chakras in our hands. When we talk about channeling, there's a chakra at the very base of the skull that allows interdimensional communication. There's other chakras that you can work with. And research, go out there and actually look at how other systems engage the chakric energy system. I know folks who study the Kabbalah may engage in a different way. There are those yoga, you know, if you're doing a more spiritually based yoga practice, will engage there's different chants for each chakra. So if you're doing a specific day's worth of work, use the chants that will engage the chakric field. Jonathan Goldman has a really great sonic method for engaging the chakras. There's different vowel sounds that are associated with each chakra, so you can engage those different energy systems in a multitude of ways. Be creative, have fun with it, but don't just work on the heart chakra. You know, I hear it I hear people come to my shop all the time. How to open my heart chakra? How to open my heart chakra? I want to find love. Well, it's great. You know, heart chakra is fantastic and phenomenal, but there are 6 other systems that you want to be sure that you're balancing out with. And I would challenge those of you out there, really take on, you know, a practice like the one Skull just gave, you know, and do a chakra a day and go really deep into that chakra. Do a journaling exercise for your visualizations. Sacral chakra, the sexuality chakra, owning yourself, owning your power within that space. Who are you in the world? How do you relate to yourself, and how do you relate to others? The one we forget about a lot too is the throat chakra, engaging the speaking aspect, not just speaking externally, but speaking to ourselves in that internal space. Solar plexus is one I encourage a lot of people to work on. We're in a time of chaos, and sometimes with chaos, we go into those upheaval states, and it can engage that fear space. So be sure that you're allowing yourself to work through whatever may be blocking the chakras. So, balancing the chakras, someone just asked in the chat. So the way you balance them out is to do something like a process like Skull just gave. So 7 main energy systems, 7 days a week, engage one a day, and get yourself into a steady practice of doing that. And you'll have something that you can do as a simple meditation, but you can take that thing throughout the entire day. So it's not just something you just do in the morning, but look at how that chakra is playing out through your day. How is the solar plexus engaging through the day? How am I feeling grounded today? Am I feeling that I'm off balance today? Ask yourself those questions. Don't just, just sit there and assume that the chakra is going to answer everything. Do some of that internal dialoguing with yourself. Journaling is a really great way to start capturing and looking back to see how your day was affected by those different energy systems, and creating your own method of clearing and cleansing the energy fields.
Yeah, and I mean, even just, I know not everyone who may be listening to this is totally even familiar with the term
right.
of, like, chakras and stuff, so, I mean, it's good just to, like, sort of go back, like, chakras, I mean, just at least in the way I understand them from sort of a practical sense of things, like, the universe is, like, made up of these energy vortexes, and really, like, what composes reality is just like this accumulation of these energy vortexes into bigger energy vortexes. So I mean, you get and these energy vortexes are really no different from like black holes, if you want to call them that. This
right.
is even this idea, Dalai Lama talks about this, and I don't want to use the term figured this out, but I mean, I came to this realization before realizing the Dalai Lama did as well, but like this idea that like every single black hole or every single atom is a black hole. So I mean, it's this idea that you have all these like super tiny vortexes of energies that build up on top of each other, and then they sort of collect, and then they create like new vortexes. So within our own body, we have the 7 main energy vortexes. So I mean, you can call them chakras if you want, or you can call them energy vortexes. It's essentially the same thing. And these different energy vortexes like correspond with different like vibrational properties like within this reality, and are sort of like connecting us to different energies, like different frequencies. Like the different vibrational frequencies of the chakras are like not much different from like the different vibrational frequencies that you get on a color spectrum, and it actually is like quite the same thing, which is why when you see chakras, if you type in chakras on Google Images, you see they're depicted in different colors, and that's because like each one corresponds with a different vibrational frequency, and that frequency is associated with a color. And that can also tie in with your practice of maybe even say if you're doing this whole thing with the 7 days a week, you could like wear a certain color associated with the chakra on that particular
right.
day. So like Monday would be red, and then like by the time you get to like Saturday and Sunday, you're sort of wearing like the purples and the indigo and pinks and stuff. And I'm not totally super practiced on this, but I mean there is also the idea that like through the use of mantras are your ohms and your ahs and your saws and your rahs. I mean I know a lot of people know of these, but probably not too many actually practice them. But with these actual pronunciations of these vowels, like of these sounds, you're actually going to like tap into that sort of frequency within the chakras of your own system, within your own body. So there is a practical and visceral experience that correlates to using mantras, and if you look at like a lot of the esoteric and Gnostic practices, this is something that they stress so fundamentally is the essential use of mantras, because it's going to help like activate and get your chakras actually like rotating. And I guarantee you, like right now, the people listening to this show, like your chakras are like not fully rotating. And the only reason I'm telling you that is because like if you were to actually like dedicate the time into doing this, and you would experience that moment when suddenly like your chakras actually like do start rotating, it would be like a new experience for you. So, I mean, you don't want to just say that, like, you're like, oh, you know, nah, my chakras are fine and stuff like that. Like, there's like a next level that not a lot of us have actually gotten to, and it does take practice, and it does take dedication, and it does take commitment, but it actually does take like experimenting and experiencing these visceral aspects of this reality. So a simple thing, like if you want to try doing this, is simply start off with Om. Like Om is like it's for the heart chakra, right?
No, Om is third eye.
No, okay, yeah, okay. What? Okay, sorry. Then what's the heart chakra? Since we were talking about heart
chakra is
Yam.
Is Yam, I think. There's like it has a Kundalini one,
so.
But the sound is the vowel sound for the heart chakra. So tends to be an easier one to do.
Yeah.
So.
So again, that's something that practice, and you almost want to be able to. I mean, maybe that's something we can get into on a later show. Like, I am not totally an expert on it. I do have friends who are more versed on it than I am, and just kind of the whole point of this is that, like, you know, each of us has our own piece of the puzzle, and that's why we're trying to communicate so we can learn from each other. But totally, like, if you want to experience this whole concept of chakras, like, there is a visceral side to it, and part of that is the idea that, like, they are energy vortexes. There is like a vibrational property to each chakra, and those vibrational properties can be like interacted with using our own voice. Like, when you think of it, like, we have the tools within our own body to activate our chakras, and it's something that just takes a little bit of dedication. So the only thing that is really stopping you right now is whether or not you have the willpower. So ask yourself, do you have the willpower? And then go up and start like researching like chakra mantras, like mantras, mantra, is the term for the ohms and the ahs and the rahs and the stuff, and that's not just fluff. There's a real practical aspect that you can experience from that.
There's actually a book by a great chanter named Thomas Ashley Ferran called Chakra Mantras, and it's an entire book full of chakra-specific mantras, because when you're using the mantras, the actual mantras for chakra work are called bijas, B-I-J-A-S, and there's different bijas that are assigned. These are the root sounds, the sonic tones that make up every other sound in the Hindu practice of doing mantra work. And the idea with these is, a lot of people say, you know, you want to do them each 7 times, so you'll do each of the sounds 7 times. If you're engaging more of the deeper meditations using mantra, anything like Om Mani Padme Om, Om Namah Shivaya, those different mantras are also associated with different chakras. Even the Ganesha mantras all have associations. So if you're using a mantra in your practice, and I hear a lot of people that use things like Om Gam Ganapate Namaha, and you'll use these mantras, but sometimes they don't understand the other associations. In yoga even, each asana that you do also has an associated mantra that goes to it. And a lot of people forget about these other more spiritual aspects to their yogic practice.
Sorry, what's asana?
Asana. So asana is the actual posture. So it's the actual postures.
Yeah.
So, you know, being able to engage in that will allow you to see how those pieces all interconnect and relate to one another. But it's just one more piece to a greater extending and expanding puzzle. And I'll post a couple links. I have a couple links that I'll post in the chat regarding some of the bijas and some folks who do some really great work with them. So you want to do our meditation?
Yeah, and I want to get some more people to call in. Like, I mean, I sort of feel guilty. Like, I don't want to think that we're like, you know, ignoring people. Like, have there been people with you?
We just have a couple who've just popped in, and I've been grabbing the questions as I'm seeing them pop up, and a lot of the stuff people are asking now is about the chakras. We do have one question from Dylan Wallace that we'll take after the meditation. That is a question that's been asked several times before, so I think it's about indigo kids and the crystal kids. So it's a topic, it's a question a lot of folks have been asking about. So I think let's jump into our meditation, and then we'll just do a quicker one here, and then we'll jump right into the questions.
Okay, so I think for this meditation. I know for those who are listening last week, we actually did a meditation on the paradigm shift sigil. We don't necessarily have to do that every week. I would like to return to that idea. I think for this one, maybe let's say focus on the heart chakra and with corresponding mantra would be maybe an appropriate thing. And if you could maybe give a demonstration on how that mantra would be done, so the people on their end who are listening can actually like do the mantra while partaking in this meditation. Would that be appropriate?
Yeah, so we can do that. So what I recommend you doing is I'll play the sonic tone here. So we'll do one of our uploaded hertz that we already have. Let's see. Let's find a good one here. So we'll do the 741 hertz tone. So the idea here is, with your eyes closed, even with your eyes open, do the heart chakra sound. So let's just do the ah. The ah is really easy because it's you don't have to. It doesn't require anything other than the vowel sound ah. It's something we typically do anyways, and just do it in repetition. So you take a deep breath in, and then ah, and then inhale, and then ah. So each inhale brings in the ah into the heart center. Each exhale creates expansion for the next ah to come into the system. And just do it throughout the entire song and allow yourself to connect each time to the ah. So for the duration of the song, do it like a mantra. So japa mantra is when you're actually doing mantra in repetition. The idea is to do it 108 times. That's the actual use of japa. You'll see the prayer beads, and they have 108 beads. And they say 104 for the deity you're praying to, or for the mantra, and 4 because you're going to forget and mess up 4 times. So so you have built-in error systems. So we'll do the 741 hertz, and we'll just do the ah. So focus on the sigil, do the ah, and then listen to the harmonics. Do we have the sigil first one? Or?
No. Let's focus on the mantra. Focus on the visceral sensations that you're experiencing with the mantra. Let go of the idea that it might seem silly. And even if you're listening to this right now with someone in the room with you, like do it together. Like encourage each other. Like get past the idea that this is sort of goofy stuff. Like it might seem goofy, but this is the tools that we have like within our own body that we need to get into the habit of using if we literally want to start opening up our chakras. And as we start opening up our chakras, we start like becoming more intuitive, and then we're going to be able to like serve others in more efficient ways. So I mean, do this for non-selfish reasons too, not just to try and get like a tingly feeling out of it. Like this is something that is moving you forward on your practice. Right. And so if you are someone who is a more visual type person, look at a color like the color green, especially because of the heart chakra color. So if you're someone who has a harder time visualizing, focus on one singular thing. And if you have the color green around you somewhere, focus on that color and allow that to be the thing that takes you into the meditation. So just allow yourself to be present. Just be present with it. And this is something you can do throughout the week too. So go back and download the archive and be part of that experience. So everybody just take a deep breath. Just let it all go for the next few moments. And I'll go ahead and walk us into the meditation, and we'll sit there for a bit. So go ahead and start tuning into your breath, allowing yourself to go a little deeper within with each inhalation, each exhalation, and creating space for the next breath, for the next experience. Allow yourself to be centered within that space of deep listening, deep awareness, and deep intention. Our intention for this meditation is to focus on the mantra, ah. Allow the ah to enter into every aspect of your being with each breath as we now begin our meditation.
begin tuning into your breath, allowing yourself to come back into your space, allowing the breath to maintain this connection to the energy that you just raised through the mantra, through the opening of the heart center. Take a nice deep breath in and exhale as you return back into the space around you. And there we have it. So post, anything that you experienced or felt during that meditation in the chat room, because that was, a little bit different.
Yeah, and I know for the audio, obviously working with what we got is not the best, but I mean, if you were working with something like the hertz that we're using here, it always helps to have headphones or something like that. It would be a suggestion as well, or just sort of maybe even just turn the volume down a bit, but make sure you tune back in by the time that Michael keys us up, and here we are. We're ready to continue. So
and then it's like AM radio, so it's not going to be the best. It's not like high definition audio here. So make it the best. And now that you have the mantra, go out and use the mantra through the day. So those of you who were asking about the chakras, there are different ones for each chakra. Go out and you can use those through your day. So just kind of allow yourself to be in that space of chanting the sacred sounds through your day. So, number to call in, 347-326-9263. Now that all those heart centers and the chakras and things are opened. So let's see, the question here from Dylan Wallace, because I'll get to this, just because a lot of people have been asking about what our thoughts are on the indigos. Let's see here. I'm trying to find a question. I want to bring up the topic of Indigo Children. Why I understand the basis of this concept. I want to know what your perspective and maybe provide something to talk about on the show for who don't know. What are your thoughts on the indigos and crystals and such?
Well, I mean, I guess that was like one of the first terms I remember hearing back in the day. I mean, back in the day being like, I don't know, like 2007 or 2008 or whatever. The term itself has been around for a while longer than that, but I mean, depending on who you ask, you're going to get a different answer. But basically, the sort of bubble that you can wrap it up into is this idea that indigo children are people, not even necessarily just children, like children at one point, but now they've grown up into people who are here to help in this whole like consciousness shifting thing that is going on. So they may naturally be coming into this existence, into this incarnation, with more awareness. Like they're remembering quicker. Their intuitive abilities are more intact. Like maybe when they were younger, they were like more likely to sit outside on the playground and wait for the UFO to pick them up or something like that. These kids who would be talking about really peculiar things, and depending on who they were getting. Depending on the environment they were growing up in, I think that's a big case these days. Is that people who like children who you may label as indigo kids do have a lot of energy, and not to say, I mean, it's weird. Like you don't want to just say that like they are different or they are special or anything like that, but there's an aspect of them, and call it the soul or whatever you want, but it's like more ready to like take on the task at hand should the environment they're in be fostering their growth appropriately. So in terms of indigos and stuff, another thing you can also think about is the idea that indigos, crystals, rainbows, they refer to like a chronological time frame. So indigos are children born between like, I mean, I'm just ballparking it, but like like 1985 and 1993, and then like crystals are like born between like 1995 and 2000, whatever, and then rainbows are like born after 2000, etc. It doesn't even really matter in my mind. So I mean, in a sense, like I mean, like myself and Michael, I mean, people would call us indigos if they choose to use that term, and for some people it does. It helps label. I mean, labels do come in handy, but I mean they're not necessarily appropriate. Right. They're not necessarily something that you want to like really truly identify yourself with. So I mean, like people can call me an indigo kid, and I've had that I've had that happen, like especially with some of the older generation of the, like those are the people who were sort of around when that coin was first termed, because there's actually been like studies on it where a lady was like actually like noticing, like back, like this whole intuitive thing is not something new just within like the recent like 15 years or whatever. Like there's been people who back in the 70s were into like the exact same type of energies that we're into now. But maybe like their terms that they were using were fairly different or whatever. But they back then, I'm just trying to think. I know I heard some info somewhere, but I mean, I think the term Indigo Children was actually coined in the 1980s or something. Like I think there was like an original study or whatever. But yeah, anyways, long story short, I've had that happen. I've had like older people come up to me and be like, yeah, like you're the Indigo Children, like you're the future, like all right, and like pat me on the back, and I'm just like, okay, like I'm just gonna keep doing what I'm doing and stuff. So. But I mean, you know what? Like I mean, anybody can be an indigo. I mean, like why can't somebody who's like right now in like their 70s, why can't they be considered an indigo or whatever? I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Labels are just labels. I think we get so caught up in labels sometimes that we forget, and then we so try to classify ourselves into certain labels. Dolores Cannon wrote this really great book that just came out called The Three Waves of Volunteers, and depending on which generation you were born in, there's certain duties that were assigned to your generation to do in this lifetime, and the indigos are the older kids now, and then the crystals for the next generation, who are also said to be star children, who are not necessarily rainbow. So like we get so caught up in these labelings and these different terms, and we get so far away from just accepting who we are in those spaces. And I think sometimes, especially in metaphysical environments and spaces, we sometimes reach these labels to try to define who we are in those spaces rather than just being in the space. So I don't like labels like that. We do know that the children coming in now are more tuned in, and I feel that as technology moves forward, there are higher resonances that these children are stepping into, and we all have seen or may have family members who are these young kids who are logging on the computer and can probably run programs better than most of us. But it's this new generation, a new wave, this new thought of just trying to define ourselves in these spaces. And I think sometimes we get so caught up in the labels that we forget that it's just a matter of being present in our own experience.
I think one way to sort of look at the whole indigo thing in terms of like what needs to be done, if you do want to recognize the idea of indigos and stuff like that, to me the aspect to it that I sort of identify with is this idea that, like, yes, there are children who are alive right now, and even children who will be born in the future, who are naturally coming in with more sensitivity to these energies. So the question we have to keep in mind is, like, how do we foster that growth? Like, what can we do to help them keep those energies progressing, rather than just have those energies turn into things such as frustration and anger and eventually like depression? Because I think that's a big case that I think even listeners in this show maybe have experienced. If they are quote unquote indigo, I'm sure they have probably gone through those phases where they have had trouble fitting in with society and everything, and they do go through these phases of depression, and again, like, it's part of this life path where eventually they come around to like figuring out who they are, and they're on their way and stuff. But if we can sort of bring in a child where they don't necessarily have to go through that phase of depression, quote unquote, then like imagine the potential that would be there by the time they get to in their early in their teenage years or whatever. Like that is this idea of the super psychics or whatever.
Right. The X-Men.
Yes.
So you get like the Professor X's that are now being born. That's really gonna suck. That would be the only time that I feel that if the next generation gets these super cool mutant powers, and then our generation just gets screwed with, you guys are indigos, but these are the super duper. I'd be a little pissed.
They're like born with flying powers and laser eyes. I'm just like, what? Like,
I would at that point be a little upset with labels.
Yeah, it's true. Anyways, all right. I think do we have
one call? Yeah, we have a call here. So let's take this one and see what happens. We have just a few minutes here, so let's see. All right, area code 781, your first name, where you're calling from.
Hi, my name's Annie. I'm calling from Peabody, Massachusetts.
Hey, what's up? So what's your question?
My question is about sleep paralysis and astral projection.
All right, cool.
So do you have anything specific with it that you want to know?
I was just wondering why sleep paralysis is the ideal time to try astral projection.
Michael, go ahead.
Why is sleep paralysis associated with astral projection? Is that what your question is?
Yeah.
Well, there's actually in the body that keeps us in a state of stasis while we're sleeping. Sometimes, they're not associated always. So sleep paralysis isn't always associated with astral projection or out-of-body experience. There is actually a chemical that's from the body that keeps us in that sleep state so that we don't lash out and go walking around the house, in our dreams. Sometimes when you wake up faster, so it's like your brain wakes up faster than your body does, and then that's what that sleep paralysis state is. You're fully conscious in that state. Now, what they say, there's a theory with that, is that if you can separate yourself from the fear of thinking you're in a coma and allow yourself at that moment to sink back in, you can have a state of lucid dreaming, and it can lead into some of the astral stuff. It's just a matter of understanding that in that, and I've had that happen, and I don't like sleep paralysis at all. I'm one of those people who is a severe non-proponent of sleep paralysis, just because of that. For me, it's just never really been a great experience. But sometimes you'll have a momentary experience of sleep paralysis as you're getting ready to do some of the transitional work. But it's a fear state, a place where you're surrendering into, but they say if you are in a paralysis state, become fully conscious within that state, you can do some of the transitional work to do some lucidity or some projection stuff. Have you had experiences of sleep paralysis?
I have. My most recent one was probably about a week ago. Mm-hmm. And I was, I'm not sure how long it was. I couldn't really tell, but I was hallucinating.
Mm-hmm.
I heard voices whispering to me. I don't really remember what they were saying. And then there was a tiger on my bed. I think some more things happened, but it was all just random stuff.
Right. Well, you're also in that state between awake and asleep, too, but you're in that sleep paralysis state. So some of the stuff that is, so we're in that place between places, that realm between awake and this reality, this more dense reality. And some of the things that are associated commonly with sleep paralysis were the ideas of possession, where something was sitting on your chest or there was something in the room with you. So we become more open in that state to some of the things that may be present. Not to say that there is a tiger that sits on your bed while you sleep, but we become more hyper-aware of those interdimensional connections that we have when we are in a state of sleep paralysis, because really it is the state between being awake and asleep. So all those processes are still trying to catch up to one another. But, like Skull always says, if you're in your dream, you're able to meditate, you're able to go a little deeper. So in that state of sleep paralysis, surrendering into that moment without fear can allow you to have some of those transitional experiences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's... Sorry, go ahead. I'll hear what you say.
One time in meditation, I got the feeling that I usually get right before I go into sleep paralysis, but then I kind of freaked out and opened my eyes.
Yeah, I don't like sleep paralysis.
Yeah,
pretty creepy.
I mean,
I also find that if I try really, really hard, I can move certain parts of my body a little.
Yeah. I just scream.
Yeah. or you scream without actually screaming and stuff. Yeah, I mean, it's scary to us because it's so unfamiliar, obviously, compared to like our sort of waking state and stuff. But yeah, no, kind of what Michael was saying. If you can understand what's happening, and I mean, even just from a biological perspective, like basically, yes, like when you're going to sleep, and this happens every time you go to sleep, your body falls asleep before your mind does. So I mean, one thing, just because the last practical tip that people can sort of take to their practice is, okay, when you're falling asleep, you'll notice this. You'll be like lay perfectly still, lay on your back or whatever is comfortable, and you might find that you'll get a sudden itch. Don't scratch that itch, because all that itch is doing is it's your body checking whether or not you are asleep. It's your body checking if your mind is asleep or not. So if you are lying there and you have a slight itch and you ignore it, then your mind is going to think that your body is going to think that your mind is asleep, and then it's going to move you deeper into like that sleep state, where you'll actually still be able to like maintain consciousness as you go into like that sleep paralysis. Again, if you notice those small itches, do your best to ignore them, because all you're doing is it's just your body just doing this like fail-safe mechanism to see whether or not you're actually still awake. And if you consciously ignore them, you're going to trick your body into moving into that paralysis, and then when you do, you'll actually like be able to like maintain a higher state of awareness going into your dreams or going into like a deeper state of meditation.
All right, we're on 30 seconds. So we have to go ahead and sign off here, but we'll leave 10 seconds for remaining.
Dude.
Thanks for calling in, everyone.
ParadigmShiftCentral.com. Yeah. Rushing out the door. It's all right. We got next week.
Yeah, it's how we roll, you know. So now we're in the ether world between places here. So we'll talk for just a couple minutes to kind of sign us off. So those of you who are listening right now are listening in the archive. Yeah, we are no longer part of this dimensional reality, but
this does download into the MP3, does it not?
Yes, it does. Absolutely. So those of you who are,
so this can still be included on the YouTube as well.
Yeah, so be part of the experience, share the show, because you're obviously listening to this on the download. Go back, listen to the archives, be part of this experience with us. As always, we thank you all for joining us and sharing in the fantastic experience that is Paradigm Shift Radio. So tune in every Saturday night, 11 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Once again, thanks everyone for tuning in.